It is autumn, and clearly also in the global economy we are experiencing an autumn season. Now the autumn season is following a quite beautiful summer period, because during the summer month actually we saw that the global economy, and in particular the Western countries, did very well. They actually recovered quite substantially from the dramatic decline in economic growth during the second quarter. Nevertheless, we don't know the growth figures for the third quarter yet. We have to wait for the official figures, but we see in several indicators actually that the situation will be quite good in the third quarter. For example, if you look at the retail sales, we see that retail sales have recovered during the summer, actually in most economies. In some countries there was a little bit of hesitation at the beginning of the summer, but that had quite often to do with the postponement of sales periods, because sales periods taking place, for example, in August, obviously had a clearly positive effect, which we saw, for example, for the euro area as a whole. Also in the US, we saw that retail sales did quite well in recent months. Now, we do expect, obviously, that if we look at the lockdown situation and the virus situation at this moment, that things may get worse. And while consumers have been spending quite a lot in recent months, they may not continue doing so in the months ahead. And that would obviously slow down the economic recovery near the end of the year. If you look at the supply side of the economy, we also see very positive signals, in particular in the industry. In the industry, we see a recovery. It's a very steady but very gradual recovery. It goes step by step, and still industrial activity is around 90% of the pre-corona level. So still a long way to go, but at least there is a clear recovery. On the supply side too, we see that in services activities there we see quite disappointing results. And as obviously we all know that lots of services activities have been hit very severely by the corona crisis. Think of what happened to restaurants and think what happened to events organizers and so on. So clearly there is a longer way to go for services activities than for industrial activities. Now, taken together, we do expect that the third quarter will be a good quarter, but the fourth quarter will probably be confronted with these slowdown elements. And this has mainly to do with the second wave of the pandemic. And the second wave is clearly hitting the global economy everywhere. Obviously, there are differences across countries, that makes sense. But generally speaking, we believe that the recovery will be slower, but nevertheless, it will continue next year and into the following year. Now, looking at individual countries, we see that across Europe there are still major differences. In particular, the northern countries are doing much better than the southern European countries. And in particular, everything around the German economy is recovering quite substantially and quite fast, whereas everything in southern Europe clearly is lagging behind. In the US, we also see a faster than expected recovery, which is definitely good news. And on top of that, we may get some more fiscal stimulus. Now, the fiscal stimulus in the US is currently part of a political game. There are US presidential elections upcoming, and during these election campaigns, it's clear that none of the main parties are willing to give in. So therefore, the fiscal stimulus may only come after the US presidential elections, but it could give an additional boost to the US economy later on. Talking about the US presidential elections, in general, we expect that this will be quite a tense campaign and quite tense outcome, because generally speaking, we see that the popular vote is supporting Joe Biden, but at the same time, we know that it's not the popular vote that really counts. What really matters is how many swing states you can conquer as a presidential candidate. And there we expect that it will be quite a tough campaign for both candidates. We are more concerned, actually, not so much about the outcome of the elections, but rather about the transition process or eventual transition process between two presidencies. It's clear that Donald Trump indicated that he may not be very in favor of a smooth transition period. And that's obviously, affecting market sentiment. And market sentiment today is taking into account that US presidential elections may matter much more this year than they normally do. Now, the US presidential elections are not the only disturbing factor today. There's also Brexit, yes, Brexit again, because again we see rather messy developments around the negotiation table between the European Union and United Kingdom. Nevertheless, we believe that, as we said before, Brexit won't be the main disturbing factor today, even not the US presidential elections, but it's actually ultimately the pandemic itself. It's the pandemic that really determines the economic evolutions in the near future. Now, generally speaking, we see that markets remain relatively calm. This has also to do with the expectation that, in particular, the ECB might come in again and may try to support the economy again. And we see, for example, that long-term interest rates are coming down. For example, the German long-term interest rates, which in particular also signal that people are looking for safe havens again. And they look for safe investment places. They are sheltering there against potential turbulence that we'll see in the future. More importantly, I think, is that the long-term interest rate differentials in Europe are again becoming narrower. So basically that means that markets trust that the European Monetary Union will work as a system, and moreover that the ECB might indeed rescue the system if necessary. So all in all, I think we can say that the global economy is indeed in an autumn season. Things may slow down a little bit in the recovery phase, but obviously we hope that after this autumn season we will get a very mild winter, that hopefully will be followed by a beautiful spring. Let's wait and see.